Okay, guys, so here we go. This is the Meet the Author recording with Jason Reynolds. He's going to tell you about the book, and then he's going to read parts of it. Then I'll go ahead and continue the story. Enjoy, guys. It's awesome.
This is Jason Reynolds, and I'm the author of Look Both Ways. Look Both Ways is a book written in a series of stories that are all interconnected about one neighborhood and one school. And it's all about exploring what happens when the bell rings and school is over. I think so often we think about school as lockers and school buses and classrooms and bells, but really the most interesting part of school is that 10 to 15-minute walk home when there are no adults around to watch young people. I think that's when young people get to be fully themselves and they get to explore the worlds around them and they get to live autonomously, freely, and wholly without anybody clocking them or on their backs or chastising. And I think in that comes a lot of adventure. And besides all of those things, I think ultimately this story shows the interconnectedness of young people, even if they're going separate ways home. They all sit in the classroom, but once the bell rings, everyone has a different journey. And even as the journeys sort of split and splinter off, they still connected simply by youth, by curiosity, by imagination, and all the other things that makes up our lives as kids. Now I'm going to read a bit of Look Both Ways. This story was going to begin like all the best stories, with a school bus falling from the sky. But no one saw it happen. No one heard anything. So instead, this story will begin like all the good ones, with boogers. If you don't get all them nasty half-baked goblins out your nose, I promise I'm not walking home with you. I'm not playing. Jasmine Jordan said this like she said most things, with her whole body. Like the words weren't just coming out of her mouth, but were also rolling down her spine. She said it like she meant it. Said it with the same don't play with me tone her mother used whenever she was trying to talk to Jasmine about something important for her real life. And Jasmine turned the music up in her ears real loud to drown her mother out and scroll on, scroll on. If you don't take them earbuds, earphones, or whatever they call out your coconut head, it's going to be me turning up the volume and the bass, and I ain't talking about no music. That tone. Jasmine's booger removal warning was aimed at her stuffy-nosed best friend Terrence Jumper, TJ. Well, Jasmine called him her best friend who's a boy, but she didn't have best friends who were girls, so TJ was her best friend, and she was his. Been like that for a long time, since he moved on to Marston Street 3 houses down from her. Since the only way their mothers would let them be walkers was if they walked together because they were the only kids who lived on their blocks. Since 6 years. So since forever.
Okay, so I'll continue the story. Again, teachers, this is your time where you can pause if you'd like, or if you want to continue listening, it's your call. I'm going to change the... Okay. So since forever. The bell rang, and Jasmine and TJ had just left their last class for the day. The only class they had together, life science with Mr. Fontana. You've been back to school for 2 days and you're already starting with me? JT spun the black lock dial confidently, like he could feel the difference in the grooves and would know when he landed on the right numbers. How could I not? Look at them things. Honestly, TJ, I don't even know how you're breathing right now, Jasmine continued. Their lockers were right next to each other, luckily, because Jasmine, unlike TJ, turned her lock with an intense concentration, glaring at it as if the combination could up and change at any second, or as if her fingers might stop working at any moment. And if for some strange reason either of those things happened, at least she knew TJ was right there to help her. I know you have friends like that, right, boys and girls? TJ shrugged, tossing his science book into the floor of the metal closet. The smell of feet wafting up like it was a cloud of dust unsettled and unsettling. The floor of his locker was littered with empty snack bags, and Jasmine had slid through the door vent. Jasmine had slid through the door vent between classes over the last 2 days. Trash, yes, but Jasmine and TJ called them friendship flags, their litter of love. And because Jasmine had been gone for a while, they were basically notes that said, "I've missed you." Cheeto dust. Then finally, with a hardened snot like tiny stones rolled in front of the entrances of his nose, TJ turned the bottom of his shirt up and mopped it. A streak of slime smeared across his lip as he swiped and pinched then dug, just enough for it to count as a dig, but not enough for it to count as digging. TJ tilted his face upward so Jasmine could get a clear line of sight into his nostrils. Better? He asked, half sincere, half hoping there was one more booger left and that it was somehow making a mean face at Jasmine. Jasmine stared into DJ's nose like she was peering through a brown microscope of flesh. And she did this totally unfazed by the fact that TJ had just used his t-shirt, the one he was wearing, as a tissue. And why would she be bothered? Not that it wasn't disgusting, it was, but she'd known him a long time. Had seen him do things that made boogers on the bottom of a t-shirt seem like nothing more than an added decoration. Booger bedazzle, a little flavor for his fashion. Had seen him use his fingers to pick gum off the bottom of his sneakers and hers. And of course, nothing would ever beat the time he clapped a mosquito dead right when it had bitten him, then licked the fly slime off his arm. Oy! And that one Jasmine had dared him to do. Paid him $1 for it. Worth it for both of them. You know, I can see straight through your brain, Jasmine said, pretending to still be examining, and it turns out there's a lot of it missing. She plucked TJ's nose. Psych, 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 psych. Yeah, you good. I guess I can be seen with you now. Whatever, locker slam. I mean, we all boogers anyway. You might be a booger, locker slam. But me, I ain't no booger. That's what you think, TJ went on as they swapped backpacks. His was light. Jasmine's was packed with every class's textbook and all the world's notebooks. Makeup work, she could have carried it herself, but TJ was concerned about her back, about her muscles, because she was still recovering from the attack. They headed down the crowded corridor, noisy with sneaker squeaks and thick with end-of-the-day funk. See, I've been thinking about this. Boogers ain't nothing but water mixed with like dust and particles in the air and stuff like that. How do you know? Jasmine interrupted. Knowing TJ, he could have heard this anywhere, like from Cynthia Sower. Everybody called her Say-So, who jokes 99.99999% of the time. Looked it up online once, TJ explained. Was trying to figure out why they so salty. That means he tasted it. Wait, Jasmine thrust up a hand as if walling off the rest of TJ's words. You eat them? Come on, Jasmine. It ain't fair to hold my past against me. Dang. TJ shook his head. Now, if you're done interrupting, let me continue with my hypothesis. He broke hypothesis down into 4 fragmented words to put some spice on it. Hypothesis. So boogers are basically water and dust. He put a finger in the air. And human beings are mostly water, right? Ain't that what Fantana said at the beginning of the year? Right. Okay, follow me. Every Sunday, when we be at church, they always be talking about how God made us out of dust, right? TJ and Jasmine went to the same church where they sang in the youth choir together. TJ always asked Mrs. Bronson, the choir director, to let him sing solos, even though his voice was all over the place. A set of wind chimes in a hurricane, and Jasmine's singing wasn't much better. Only difference was that she knew it and would never think to ask for a solo. I love his confidence, right? She loved to wear the graduation robes and harmonize and sway and clap, snuggling her voice into the others like drawers into a dresser. Her mother always told her holding a note is talent enough. Even though TJ couldn't hold a note, and definitely that wasn't his talent, he could hold a conversation. So he continued, God making man from dust and blowing breath into his nostrils and all that, right? I guess. You think God's breath stank? What? Never mind, probably not. TJ got himself back on track. So if God made man from dust and now for some reason man and woman Jasmine tacked on. Yeah, and woman consist of mostly water, then basically we water and dust, right? TJ was waving his hand around like he was drawing some grand equation on an invisible board. Jasmine didn't say nothing, and she didn't need to for TJ to bring his theory home, which means, TJ concluded, and Jasmine could practically see the drum roll behind his eyes, we all basically boogers. TJ wore satisfaction on his face like good lotion, and Jasmine wore confusion on hers like she'd been slapped with a gluey palm. Wrong, she clapped back. You ain't gotta believe me, TJ said, holding the door for Jasmine as they finally made it out of the building. Oh, I don't. You don't have to, TJ repeated, but that don't mean it ain't true. See, no matter what you think I be doing in school, I really be learning. And seriously, I need to start teaching because while all these so-called scientists and teachers like Mr. Pantana be busy trying to figure out if aliens are real, I've already figured out that what boogers are like, the babyest form of babies. This made Jasmine spit air. See, even though TJ was ridiculous and annoying and sometimes gross, she appreciated the fact that he always made her laugh whether she wanted to or not, whether he was trying to or not. He was always there to chip some off the hard off. Tear and the toughness Jasmine had built up over the school year. It had been a rough one for her. It started with her parents separating and her father moving out. There was no drama around it. No fighting, nothing ugly, nothing like the movies. At least not that she knew of. Just a really uncomfortable conversation at the kitchen table where her folks looking at her like she was an exotic fish in a sandwich bag, darting back and forth while she squirmed in her seat as if her skin was too tight for her body. We love you very much. It's not your fault. Sometimes relationships change. Sometimes people are better apart. None of this is your fault. Your father and I love you very much. Your mother and I love you very much. Actually, that part was just like the movies, especially the part about girls and her age, the kitchen table conference, the follow-up knock knock on the bedroom door, the kid cussing at the dad, the mom saying language, the weekend visits, the awkwardness of both parents asking if everything is all right, over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that was just the first quarter. That was before she had the worst attack. And not an attack by someone else. She ain't got jumped or nothing. Instead, her body attacked itself. Jasmine had a blood disease since birth, sickle cell anemia, which can affect almost every part of the body, organs, joints, and even vision. But for the most part, it hadn't given Jasmine any real problems. A little pain sometimes, but nothing too bad until the year when she went onto full-on crisis and her body became a blaze. At least that's what it felt like. Her hands and feet swelled like plastic gloves full of water, heavy and tight, ready to burst. Her muscles felt like they'd become wood, and she imagined her bones were splintering and growing bones on their own. That's painful, huh? Jasmine was out sick for a month, her locker unopened, the lock unturned. Her mother and dad, together and apart, weirdly hovering over the hospital bed like aliens from movies, even cornier than teenage family dramas. Her parents' coldness thawed by the one and only TJ, who would show up, crack some jokes, break some ice, and leave some empty potato chip bags next to Jasmine's bed to add to the 30 he'd left in her locker, friendship flags. When Jasmine finally returned to Latimer Middle School 2 days ago, after being jumped with questions from classmates who'd almost never spoken to her before she got sick, people who looked at her sideways for being so close to DJ because boys and girls just can't be friends, Jasmine and the guidance counselor, Miss Lane, who had to figure out how she was going to catch up on her work, couldn't do it while she was laid up because she could barely move. It hurt to hold a pen, hurt to turn a page, which was how she knew she wasn't a booger. Couldn't have been a booger. She wasn't gooey enough. Maybe all boys are boogers, always acting like rocks when really you're all just blobs of dusty water, Jasmine joked as she and TJ crossed at the light, the crosswalk like a bridge leading them over the tar water from school to neighborhood. They turned down Portal Avenue, a route they'd taken hundreds of times, a route TJ had been forced to take alone for the past month. And even though Jasmine had been at school yesterday, her mother had been too nervous to let her walk back on the first day. So this was the first day walking home together again. But not me, she continued. I mean, come on, boogers get wiped away, get blown out. Okay, so if you ain't no booger, then what are you? TJ asked. Jasmine shrugged. A girl. I'm me. Come on, Jasmine, work with me here. Now TJ was spreading his arms, talked with his body like an old street hustler, trying to convince people that stolen goods are a steal. If you ain't no booger, but you had to be something else, what would you be? Jasmine thought about it as they turned left down Marston, a street lined with houses that her mother always said had been around for a long time, an old neighborhood. She'd ramble whenever they drove through newer, seemingly nicer communities where every house looked like the last house, like a choir of homes dressed in the same robes, turned the same way, singing the same melody in the same key, which makes for a boring, boring song. But Marston Street was lined with a little bit of everything, from small brick to fancy vinyl, from bay windows to colonial style, from ramblers, all on one level to 3 stories. A fence here and there, a gate here and there, grass, gravel, blacktop pavement, everything old enough to look lived in, to look tried on, old enough to be warm and worn by by a generation or two, maybe even 3. I don't know, she said at last. I mean, what was that thing Mr. Fontana was talking about in the class today? The thing he pulled up the picture of? I mean, it kind of looked like a booger. Talking about that ugly slug looking thing. What do you call it? A space bear? Yeah, she started, then stopped. Hold up. First of all, I ain't no ugly thing, just so we clear. But I'm that. I'm a water bear. Jasmine nodded. Yeah, water bear, TJ said, chuckling. That thing got like 8 legs and it got them long nails like my old mother. That weird mouth like my old mother. TJ poked his lips out and pulled them in and poked them out and pulled them in again as if he were chewing on a giant piece of bubblegum. That thing would be super scary like my old mother if it wasn't so teeny tiny, which definitely ain't like my old mother at all. Miss Macy, not scary boy. Miss Macy ain't my old mother. She my new mother. And my mother. I don't really know like that. Right. Jasmine tried to keep all the mothers organized in her head, a different equation on a different invisible board. But my old mother, TJ said, let the thought trail off, shuddering like something shot through his body, just for a moment. A bad memory, maybe? Anyway, why would you want to be that thing? The water bear or whatever. Can't nobody even see it. At least we can see boogers. Because of what Mr. Fontana was saying about how scientists tested that little water bear thingy, and they found out it might be the toughest living thing in the world. In the universe, maybe. She said it could survive the hottest heat, the coldest cold, and the pressurest pressure. I mean, they sent it into space, and it came back just crawling around like ain't nothing happened. Just crawling. That's me all day, with nails intact. Jasmine huffed on her fingers and pretended to buff the purple painted tips. Yeah, if you believe that all that, I guess. Well, if you can believe God made us out of dust, which I believe because you definitely the dustiest person I've ever known, then I can believe Mr. Fontana about this water bear. Shoot, we'd probably be stepping on them every day and don't even know it. TJ looked quick at the ground, quickly wondering what lived between the cracks in the concrete, scratched his arms like maybe the water bears were crawling in the crevices of his dry skin, and he didn't know because he really couldn't see them. Jasmine watched him fidget. Huh? She never really witnessed him nervous. TJ wasn't afraid of boogers, dog poop, eating bugs, or anything like that. But then it dawned on her that he seemed freaked out dealing with the things that he couldn't smash or smear, the things already invisible or living around him, and maybe even on him, and there was nothing he can do about it. They got to TJ's house. No gate, no fence, a patch of dry grass. The house was small and wooden like it had been built without machines. No bulldozers or anything like that, just human hands and love and hammers and nails and more love. There was a hole in the screen door that had been there for years. TJ's foot had done that. He said sometimes his feet get mad and do things like kick or stomp or run. Don't blame him, he said. And Jasmine would laugh because his jokes were always funny, even though she knew they were almost never jokes. They sat on the steps out front, bumped shoulders, and talked more about water bears and boogers and decided that maybe they could be both. Water bear boogers, Jasmine suggested while tying her shoes. TJ offered a slight adjustment. How about water booger bears? Ah, water booger bears, Jasmine perked up and nodded. I like that. The door opened behind them, the screen screeching a striking impression of TJ's voice. I thought I heard something out here. It was his not so new mother, his mom of 6 years, Miss Macy. She was dressed in her work uniform, navy pants, navy shirt, and a name tag, offset by her fuzzy, dingy, pink house slippers. She bent down and kissed both Jasmine and TJ on the tops of their heads and the remnants of her day now hovering around them like hard work halos. How was school? Fine, TJ said, smirking, sniffing, scratching. Pretty good, Jasmine confirmed. That's what I like to hear, Miss Macy said. They knew that was coming next. So what y'all learned today? Even though Miss Macy asked this question, the same question, every day, her voice was still so interested. Jasmine looked at TJ. He looked back at her. A new booger resting on his left nostril. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, like boogers often do. He wiped it with the back of his hand as they both chimed in unison, like a Sunday choir. Nothing. And that's the end of chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you check out this book on Mac and Via or curbside on Destiny. If you can't find them there, the Laredo Public Library does have some ebooks and some print available. Have a wonderful day, Bobcats.